Mr. Larson.
I'm good.
First argument is inherent. In early 2011, Obama confirmed Larry Palmer as the United States ambassador to Venezuela. Second argument is that Hugo Chavez kicked him out because he said they had no respect for Venezuela and he refused to accept Venezuelan independence. Second argument is that in retaliation, the United States ambassador was kicked out, or the Venezuelan ambassador to the U.S., Bernardo Alvarez, was kicked out of the United States. Since then, there haven't been any ambassadors. The post have been empty. That's the plan. The United States federal government should reinstate the Venezuelan Bernardo Alvarez, or the Venezuelan ambassador Bernardo Alvarez, U.S. visa, and dismiss Larry Palmer as the acting ambassador to Venezuela. Once again, the USFG should reinstate the Venezuelan ambassador Bernardo Alvarez, U.S. visa, and dismiss Larry Palmer as the ambassador to Venezuela.
Yes. We repeated it twice. Isn't that good enough? I want to copy of your plan.
If you want, like I feel
we can write it in prep time. I'm moving on. The next argument is that investors can be dismissed at the will of any president. Larry Palmer would be easily dismissed. Obama could just fire him. The next argument is a plan signals that this is a step in the right direction. There's no link to politics because no Congress doesn't have to do anything. It's literally the president just saying something. The next argument will be around. The first argument is Iran influence in Venezuela is high. The first argument is that they have been posturing the annual trade between U.S. and between Iran and Venezuela has been increasing in the hundreds of millions. The second argument is that the two have created a joint military account for security that they each donated $200 million to. The next argument is the PVVSA, which is the Venezuelan state oil company, has relations with Iran that allow Iran to skirt the U.S. sanctions and allow them to make bank off of oil. Also, the Venezuelan market is open to Iran in all instances. The third argument is that this is also in terms of the weapons police. For example, Bolivia just recently seized 2 tons of materials that were missile parts traced from Iran to Venezuela, which indicates that they are willing to send cargo to make nuclear weapons. Second argument is that even if post-Chavez this is still happening, because the Iranian president has said that despite the arrogant will of the United States, who doesn't want them to have a relationship, their bond will be stronger than ever. The next argument will be the link. The first is the plan provides a better Venezuelan relationship. The first is that it forces Iran to back off from Venezuela. The main reason why Ahmadinejad has seized this as a safe space from the United States is because Iran will, because Venezuela will use their capital to skirt sanctions. The next argument is that this reinstatement of relations causes them to back off. The only reason they're in there now is because they feel like it is a region that the United States doesn't have control over. The next argument is that plan of peace is a hardliner to Venezuela. In a world of diplomatic engagements, the Maduro administration has come to rely heavily on Iran. In 2012, for example, Chavez, the foreign minister, stated that if Obama was reelected, they would they would welcome him with open arms as his brother, which suggests that even the most extreme factions would also really like plan to be reinstated. The third argument is that plan is concession to Venezuela because it changes the way that we have relations. It cuts off the foreign policies, and also having ambassadors that do bad things to Venezuela is also necessary for United States relations. For example, in Myanmar and Algeria both had nasty relations with the United States, but when the United States engaged in diplomatic influence, we substantially curbed radical influences in that country. Fourth argument is the plan is it creates a different diplomatic ties and increases trade because Iran no longer has Venezuela as their market for growth. The first impact will be proxy wars. In October 19th of 2010, Iran and Venezuela both said that they were going to establish a military base in Venezuela, which allows Iranian troops for them to be there, and dual-use technology. The land is that they have agreed on technology, especially dual-use technology, and this is going to be the key function of the base. Also, escalation is key because the United States perceives this as a threat in the backyard. For example, in the 1960s, we almost bombed Cuba because we saw it as a threat due to proximity. The third argument is that Argentina and Brazil have also started to increase trade in that area and become more wary of the radicalization of Venezuela as a result of being buddy-buddy with Iran. The argument under this is that Venezuela can actively bypass the revenue and sanctions by getting fissile material by allowing the Venezuelan government which would allow the Iranian government to pass the red line. This would be really problematic because it would cause Israel to strike the Middle East. It's really bad because they have to use bunker busters to get to Iranian technology, which means that a lot of things get blown up. It only takes 8 nuclear weapons to blow out the sun because it costs us enough dust to be kicked up to blow out the sun and causes extinction. And also, in a world where this happens, the United States will be drawn in because we are allies with Israel. Do you need anything else?
That's good.
Okay. Next will be the elections. The thesis is that elections take place in a couple of weeks, but it's only an issue of who Chavez's successor will be. Caprias, who is in power, and the acting Vice President Maduro is all about what happens in the next couple of days. First argument is that Maduro will now. The first argument is that he was the person who succeeded Chavez. Also, Chavez made it clear that after the last cancer operation that he wanted Maduro to succeed him. According to Boris Martinov, who is from the Institute of Latin American Policy, Chavez has had a large number of supporters, which means the opposition can't get the upper hand. Little D we are a little bit under this. Is that recent political polls indicate that Capriles is behind, but Maduro stays here. But Maduro is going to win now because he has popular policies such as a 14-year rule in South America and is going to use oil revenue to fund social programs. The second argument is that it's close though because Capriles was the last person who has had the best opposition against Chavez yet. He gained 44% of the vote, which is really good, which indicates that there would be momentum to get him elected. The next argument is according to Russian analysis, the Maduro lacks the charisma and the credibility that Chavez had, which means Capriles has a good chance of being president. The link is that it forces Capriles to get elected first, as it allows he gets the credibility for a plan happening, which is good because he's friendly towards the United States and the West more generally. The second argument under this is it allows the national endowment because he's looking to more democratic policies. For example, the United States funded $100 million in anti-Chavez ads, or Obama did, in the 2010 budget, which indicates that Obama would support them. Next argument is that Maduro is anti-United States. A couple reasons. First, he wouldn't get any credit for the plan because he disapproves of neoliberal policy, which means he cannot spin the plan as a win, but Capriles could because he's been friendly to the West. Third argument is the plan empowers the diplomatic relationships to be reset. First argument is it allows the United States to back and restart relations. Also in 2011, Obama provided $5 million to opposition groups for the national budget to ensure that the opposition had a fighting chance. The next argument is that now is key. The election happens on April 13th, which means that there's a narrow window to galvanize individuals who feel frustration towards Chavez or the administration more generally. The next argument is that Maduro alone would be bad. First reason why is that inflation under him has increased 20%, which has made it impossible for people to buy basic necessities. Also, since Chavez has been in power, the Caracas has been the murder capital of the world, which has 20 times more homicides in the United States, and this is really problematic because there's also an estimated 2 million people that are homeless. Capriles is key to stop this because he has opted, he said that he would follow Brazil's model of economic development, which is really good because it has allowed them to rise in the international frame. The first argument is regional. The first impact is regional collapse, which is really bad because it spills over. There are lots of oil shocks. Venezuela is the 8th largest partner to the United States, and Libya, when there were small oil shocks, this isn't even a big market. It causes fluctuations, causes global collapse because oil is the thing that makes everything go around the world. When this happens, it becomes tried for resources. We invade to securitize the oil there.
Okay. One off, advantage 2, advantage 1, 2 up on bottom. I don't know how you flow critiques, but one of them is that. So.
Sorry, can I get that again?
Sure. 1 off on top, advantage 2, advantage 1, and 2 on bottom. Does anyone need, actually, sorry, I'm going to change that a little bit. After the 1 off, I'm going to put their background page. I'm going to make some generic case arguments that will apply to both advantages there. That gets easier than just making me draw arrows all over your flow. So the order will actually be 1 off, background, advantage 2, advantage 1, 2 off on bottom. The last off is longer if that affects the way you flow it. Does anyone need that repeated or need a moment to get ready? Okay, ready?
Topic how to get A, interpretation. Diplomatic engagement means talks, or A again. Diplomatic engagement means talks, or A. The B's file, which means they do not engage in direct talks, or A. They simply read and say the U.S. ambassador, or the Venezuelan ambassador, kick the United States. One of the C is since the first one would be limited to think that what is supposed to says we think that you would completely deal with the topic by allowing virtually anything that were even deals kind of with Venezuela to be in diplomatic engagement, which means that we would never be particular around this absolute key ability to run particular decide against you, which means that we would never have any ability to leverage off and get you in the LOC. The 2 is would be actually topic help because you do not directly engage in any sort of diplomatic engagement. You install someone who will then engage in diplomatic engagement in the future, but you do not engage in direct diplomacy, which indicates you are always going to be effectually topical. This is always going to be bad because it means that you will never be more than 1 step away from the plan. It indicates you could do some tiny amount of action that kills all predictability and limits what the affirmative B. The D is going to be the verse. First going to be A proper. First comes last, second P interpretation. C. Team of the best interpretation to win this piece of paper. Background. One is no solvency because your affirmative will inevitably fail. The U.S. and ambassador have removed ambassadors with each other over 10 times in the past. Even whenever the U.S. reinstates the ambassador, Venezuela will just kick ours out inevitably in about a year, and then we will follow by kicking them out, which means that there's absolutely no solvency. Empirics are absolutely on our side. This question, second argument is no solvency because engagement with ambassadors empirically fail. We have reinstated ambassadors a ton of times, yet Venezuela has still tried to fight against us, yet the U.S. has still tried to engage in negatively with Venezuela. It indicates there's absolutely no risk of this being able to solve for anything like diplomacy because we still hate them even though we talk to them. The 3 is the 3 is that this always be no solvency that would appear disingenuous. Venezuela will still think the U.S. is just trying to get close and trying to influence their elections, but issue that we're just trying to power project and influence them, which would be a reason why they will always say no and not allow a U.S. ambassador to come back into their country. Advantage 2. What is going to be the Maduro would actually be really good because Caprice said that he wants to cut all humanitarian aid to Cuba. Argument is that Venezuela is actually the largest provider of humanitarian aid to Cuba, provides with all their medical technology and medical aid issue there. The largest provider of doctors, which fill the critical doctor shortage that exists in Cuba. Argument that literally hundreds of millions of people will die in Cuba in a war where the aid is not there. Indicate this is an independent reason why Caprice is going to be good. Two is going to be that Maduro is good because Caprice wants to massively deregulate the environmental controls of Venezuela. That is one of the major things to Chavez did, is massively increase the fines that have from doing things like deforestation and massive dumping, which Maduro, or which Caprice rather, wants to get rid of. This indicates that this would lead to a massive destruction of the environment. We think that Venezuela's ecosystem is uniquely key. It's one of the most diverse in the entire world. We think the environmental collapse would spread globally, but not just be insular, which would kill all life on Earth through the gradual collapse of the ecosystem. 3 is Maduro's actually good because he wants to increase human rights back and break with Chavez's policies and the attainment. This is something he's made, and a campaign promise indicates that he would actually be good for human rights. And the wrong with this, the forward would be that Maduro actually wants economic liberalization through slow growth. Indicates that he would not necessarily cut off the issue. He's criticized some of Chavez's former economic policies instead, that he wants to engage in more bilateral trade with other countries, particularly in places like Europe and Asia, which would be a reason why he will always be able to help the economy. The 5 is going to be Maduro is actually going to increase social services, which will solve back to the impact of poverty. This is a major campaign pledge that he's made, which he will never reverse on. But the 6 is going to be that Venezuela's had inflation since 2007, and your impacts have not happened probably means you're people, which is not. The last argument is that every other country in Latin America has inflation too. They're all in the same problem. This instability should have either happened or it's absolutely inevitable. Advantage 1. What is not because relation between Venezuela and Iran are actually really tenuous right now because Venezuela wants oil to remain in the US dollar, whereas Iran wants to shift the way in which the currency is pegged to oil, which means that they are actually having a big diplomatic dispute right now. The 2 is that Iran has other safe spaces in Latin America that make this impact inevitable. The ace of points they are cozying up to Bolivia, whose leader just said that Iran is a major ideological ally and wants more close military ties in the future. Indicates that they will just go to Bolivia regardless of the visa points. They are massively increasing bilateral trade with Ecuador, which will mean that there's absolutely a propensity for this to happen with them. The CISA point is Brazil has actually volunteered to give them uranium. Indicates that your impact is absolutely inevitable regardless of what happens to Venezuela. 3 is Iran will never acquire nuclear weapons. The ace of points Ayatollah Khamenei said that nuclear weapons are antithetical to Islam, which would be a reason why Iran will never get nuclear weapons. The visa point is IAEA says that they wouldn't even have the capacity to make nuclear weapons until 2016, which would be a reason why your impact is a terrible time frame. Additionally, the next arm is going to be that Israel can never strike Iran for a couple reasons. The ace of points is the Fordo reactor, which is the largest source of Iranian enrichment. It's actually located within a mountain that Israeli TNWs can't even break through. But the visa point is the Mossad actually released a report that said that they would never attack because it's unfeasible. The CISA point of their planes would actually have to refuel twice to even get there, which indicates there's no propensity for this to happen. Russia decided. Is the uniquest one is that Russia is not attempting to monopolize the Arctic right now. They are instead. Russia has a fleet of 10 nuclear icebreakers, which could go into the Arctic right now. Putin said that he wants to have Russian Arctic oil be a major component of the Russian economy. However, they are engaging in bilateral talks with the U.S. Exxon company in order to have a joint sharing of the oil in the Sasco, which indicates that they're not trying to monopolize it too. This is mainly because Russia-Venezuela oil cooperation is high, which emphasizes the importance of the Arctic. Is because Putin actually sent a close TGB associate Igor Sankin to Venezuela to talk with President Maduro about increased bilateral cooperation, and Venezuela is actually considering more exclusivity deals with Russian oil. But the 3 is, however, with the recent death of Chavez, Russia is worried about the oil firm in Venezuela because they are trying to avoid immediate engagement because they're waiting to see what happens with the election. But the status quo, they are worried that any sort of change in the election could cause this not to happen. But the 4 is the U.S. has poor relations with Venezuela now. You can extend all of their uniqueness arguments about them. So the 5 is Russia fears U.S. attempting to monopolize critical resources all around the globe because the Russian defense minister, Sergei Lavrov, said that he thinks all U.S. aid attempts and all of our U.S. diplomatic attempts are secretly a U.S. coup to try to monopolize global oil reserves and cut Russia off to the beast. The link, the 1 is planning to increase U.S. diplomatic ties to Venezuela, which will be seen by Russia as the U.S. trying to cozy up with Venezuela and undercut the ability to get access to oil. In addition, the second arm of his plan is to receive the U.S. trying to monopolize their presence in Latin America, where Russia has a bunch of critical other oil deals, a bunch of other countries in the region, which would be a reason why they will fear U.S. challenge to the primacy within Latin America. Seizing control with the 1 is Russia will then have to try to move into the Arctic unilaterally. This is because they will not have stable oil supplies to necessitate that they'll have to go there in order to fuel the demand. 2 is this causes immediate war between EU and Canada, because both have also laid claims to this oil and have said that unilateral Russian militarization would be an immediate act of war. The DC impacts the 1 is this is a term case because it would cause U.S. involvement. We would have to get involved due to guarantees with this country. This is the ace of points. This would undercut our relation with Iran because we would attack one of their major allies, Russia, which would make them more likely to proliferate. The visa point is this will always undercut the U.S. ability to engage with countries like Venezuela because it will make it look like we're trying to attack their allies. The 3rd argument is this would lead to miscalculation, nuclear miscalculation, because multiple great powers fighting against each other would always mean that somebody will miscalculate and deploy a nuclear weapon. Critique. Thesis. There's the A. The one is that the U.S. engaged in attempting to pick leaders from Latin America in the past to promote U.S. interests. The U.S. has supported. It could remove President Zelaya and Honduras. Additionally, they moved to democratic elected Haitian president in 2004. Two is the U.S. coercion in elections is really successful in promoting a long-term strategic goals because it would be popped up with Sean and Iran, which actually led to the Iranian Revolution. Indicates that our attempts to prop up leaders actually failed. The three is the U.S. has a history of attempting to control Venezuelan politics back. The Rafael Caldera during numerous elections, even though the U.S. absolutely wrecked the Venezuelan economy. However, we've moved towards a policy of disengagement with the status quo and ended all diplomatic conversations. The B is the link which is that you attempt to engage diplomatically with Venezuela before the election. Our argument is that you try to influence the election the way that will help the United States. That is your solvency for advantage too, is you want to influence the election the way that will help the U.S. CSE impacts the one is attempt to dominate other governments, makes conflict absolutely inevitable. Colonialism is predicated on the ethical domination which allows the U.S. to view all the countries as serving in the world. We think that we can influence their election and their electoral process means that we literally remove all their valued life. It means that we can try to dominate them. The two is let U.S. electoral intervention of the root cause of Latin American instability, which turns your case to ace points. This is the reason why Venezuela has to seek ties with Iran in the first place, because the U.S. is constantly messing with them. They have to find other allies. But the beast point is this absolutely means that we will always get into more conflict with Venezuela. They will always be constantly in poverty. So the alternative: vote negative in order to reject the notion that the U.S. should intervene in other countries to influence their elections. Vote negative to reject the notion that the U.S. should intervene in other countries to influence elections. What is it the alternative acts as a rejection of the idea that American arbitration in foreign elections can ever solve makes a distinction that the U.S. is not the only one who dictate global political discourse, and also forced to acknowledge that we do not have to make decisions for other countries. Two is that this will lead to a total rejection of the PMC and indicate that we can solve the affirmative long run argument is not based on the time frame we should engage Venezuela allows to engage newly formed government in the future, whoever it is, and then do the plan does not necessarily say that we have to engage with this government now.
Okay, the order will be T. Case in the order of the solvency business, the elections advantage, Iran, then the K, Russia.
Can you give me that order again?
Yeah. The order will be T,
Okay.
solvency, advantage 2, advantage 1, K, Russia.
Okay.
Ready, man? Yep. You guys good?
Yep.
Whenever you are. First, we have to engage in a diplomatic, or we have to engage in talks because reinstating the ambassador requires us discussing with the government. The next counter-interpretation we diplomatic engagement means to fulfill a request to facilitate relations. First, we made a counter-interpretation. We facilitate a request. They want us to reinstate their ambassador. The next is our interpretation is more limiting. They just say we have to engage in talks. They don't have to say what those talks have to be over, which means that there could be an infinite number of talks. Means that our interpretation certainly screws predictability. Additionally, we aren't effectually topical. We certainly engage in talks. I know we're only effectually topical into their interpretation, which is bad. So it means they have to win their interpretation is good. And additionally, FXT is inevitable because all plain text would have to rely on Venezuela saying yes, which means that there's certainly an FXT step anyway. And you should prefer reasonability because it's one shot for the negative. They should have to win an in abuse claim. We're not going to know for this. Let's go to the case. The first argument is they say no solvency removed 10 times. We have a couple more arguments. First is that now is key. The reason that we had to reinstate ambassadors multiple times is because Chavez is a really fickle leader. He's dead now, son. That's why we wrote this advantage, because we have a unique opportunity to be able to renegotiate these kinds of agreements. They also say engagement fails, disagree. This is also indicative of the past when it was Chavez was the president. That's why we have to engage now. They also say no. The plan doesn't require Venezuela saying yes, because we only have to reinstate their ambassador. That is something that the U.S. does, and we kick out our own ambassador, which is also something the U.S. does. It doesn't rely on Venezuela saying yes, which means that we don't have to win this debate. Go to the advantage. They say Maduro good. That's wrong for a couple of reasons. First, they say provides aid to Cuba. There's no. They have provided no warrant as to why Capriles would stop aid to Cuba. Other than he's not a communist. They would continue aid to Cuba because they feel ideological ties. They also like supporting Latin American countries. It's empirically proven that liberalized presidents will continue to propagate. Additionally, they say Capriles decreases regulations and probably goes the other way around. If it's true that Maduro likes oil revenue, likes to send that stuff to Iran, it probably means that it goes the other way because he likes to have uranium mining and other rare earth elements. He's also ramping up relations with China, which is causing them to mine rare earth elements and oil shit, which means that there is high propensity for him to actually be for this link to actually go the other direction. They say will increase human rights abuses. Disagree. Caprius wears a baseball cap and tennis shoes. He doesn't want to crack down on his people. He's a pretty swole guy. That's why he's back. That's why he is with the United States. He's down for liberalizing practices. Additionally, they say what?
Maduro has a horrible homicide rate, right?
Oh yeah, and they conceded that Caracas already has 20 times the homicide rate of the United States, which means that all of these human rights impacts are non-unique, and there's only risk that Caprius would make that better. They also say they say
deforestation.
No, I already answered that. What's the next thing? They say something.
Slow growth.
Oh yeah.
Bilateral trade.
Oh yeah, they say he's promoting slow growth and liberalization. Disagree for a couple reasons. First, he was Chavez's right-hand man. He obviously hates liberalization. He's also been quoted as saying that the United States killed Chavez by giving him cancer. There's no reason that he would want to increase liberalization practices. Additionally, he's also not been ramping up ties with Europe because they're perceived as too liberal, and that's why they've been aligned with China. And that gives us the link turn to that other impact. They also say Maduro increased social services. Maybe that's the case, but social services obviously aren't working because there's still massive amounts of poverty, high homicide rates, and 2 million people who are homeless, which means that the only hope for that solving is having liberalized trade practices. They also say inflation not key. Disagree for a couple reasons. First, inflation has to go for a couple of years for people to be able to get it, and all of our impacts about why there are 2 million homeless people are reasons why inflation is already damaging them now, and why there's instability. The only risk of the plan versus the direction of that. They also conceded that oil shocks collapse the economy. That's conceded terminalized impact means that the conflict with Russia is inevitable because oil shocks in the United States mean that we have to compete over those resources, and that certainly means that conflict goes nuclear, means that we turn the disk. Go to the second advantage. They see non-unique relations are tenuous now. Yeah, that provides a brink for our scenario. The relations are on the brink now because of the death of Chavez. I need this because I didn't get the flow because I had to write them damn plain text for them. You can extend that. They're posturing, and then they've increased trade. They have hundreds of millions of dollars of trade, and then they recently negotiated new oil contracts, which means that there is high propensity for this. They also say Iran is inevitable. This disagree for a couple reasons. First, the other countries that they've cited don't have nearly as liberalized trade practices with Iran. But second of all, they have not agreed to basing rights. That's the key internal link to having the proxy conflict go on. Only Venezuela has agreed to that, which means that even if there is some influence, it's inevitable. It's not enough to get basing rights because Brazil and Bolivia and Ecuador all have allied with the United States in terms of the international system. They also say Iran will be able to get a weapon. Just because Khomeini said it doesn't mean they weren't doing it. They obviously are developing fissile material because they have hidden reactors in Cuba. They refuse to let inspectors in, and even if the time frame is a long way off, it doesn't matter because Israel will attempt to strike. They would still continue to try to do it because I disagree that Mossad said that they wouldn't try to do it because they have bunker buster nuclear weapons, and that costs enough to kick them in the atmosphere. Any risk that they would attempt to do it, they also wouldn't have to refuel twice because they have U.S. planes, and U.S. planes can fly from the U.S. to bomb Iran without having to fucking refuel. I don't think that the Iranians or that the Israelis have to refuel their planes that much. What?
You just sent 2 million tons of explosives to Venezuela, right? Iran did that. So. Okay,
and Iran just sent 2 million tons of explosives to Venezuela, which means that they consider proxy wars impact probably outweighs in terms of because the oil conflicts in the Middle East are inevitable, and only bombs are key, which means that we have an extinction level impact. Go to the K. First, no link uniqueness to the K. There's no link uniqueness to the K. There is a certain. We fucking prop up dictators like fucking everywhere. Empirically deny that it causes instability because there have not been global nuclear wars now, which means that there is certainly no link uniqueness. Additionally, in action, we're going to impact on this. Say in action is what allows people like North Korea to continue to have death camps because if we have to take a stance where we don't allow intervention, then it means we allow a couple of things. First, we allow Hitler to continue sending the Jews because we wouldn't have intervened in those conflicts. But second, we allow North Korea to continue the death camps that teach people that they have no value to their lives other than to support the dear leader. Additionally, you can also do perm do both, perm do the alt and no perm do the F, perm vote F in order to reject the notion that the U.S. should intervene in other countries in order to influence their elections. We don't intervene to influence their elections. We only take U.S. action. No, I'm not taking your fucking question. The action is hard. We already are taking action against them now, and the plan doesn't take explicit action promoting the one side or the other. Our arguments are all about propensity, about how the Venezuelans interpret U.S. action, not actually actively trying to promote means of verification solves enemy. You should have coalitions in order to be able to solve multiple proximate causes. Okay, fine. Fucking ask your question.
How is it physically possible to, how do you get to say you don't actually try to influence the election when your second advantage is
because we don't take an active stance on who should win the election. We only say that the Venezuelans would interpret this action as a reason to vote for the other person. Go to the fucking advantage now. God. They say Russia won't monopolize. Now, disagree for a couple reasons. First, they're fucking flying bombers over them. They're already flying nuclear bombers there. They already flew bombers over the over Guam, which means that U.S.-Russia cooperation is high now, and Russia wouldn't try to pursue oil contracts in Venezuela because they control the largest amount of oil in the world. They're the largest developed country that has oil reserves. It means that there's no propensity for this trade-off. Additionally, the plan doesn't hurt them because we already have ambassadors in a bunch of other places that Russia has oil interests, which means that there is no propensity for this to trade off. Additionally, the other argument is that it's certainly not perceived by Russia because we reinstate ambassadors all the time. All of their no solvency arguments are weak uniqueness takeouts for why Russia would be uniquely mad. Additionally, they certainly wouldn't move into the argument because they're already negotiating over the continental shelf through the UN.
Okay. Russia just solvency page. Advantage 2, advantage 1.
Can you give me that other one?
Yeah. It's going to be K. Russia just had their F solvency page where you flew that generic down. Advantage 2, advantage 1.
Cool. You said the K first?
Yeah.
Advantage 2, advantage 1?
Yep.
Awesome, thank you.
Advantage 2 is much.
Yes, that's what for that. You also know. Okay. Everyone ready? On the criticism, Central no link problem dictatorial time problem means it's inevitable, which means it's only a risk that the Russian freaks out Venezuela. They're not winning enough offense on this piece of paper. We also I state the example that they take out the effect because they say that they say the intervention doesn't cause nuclear war impacts. That probably means there's no risk of offense on this piece of paper. The death camp power reach only work in a war with the criticism links into the couple of reasons we done. I state the example of the problem dictatorial time means it's inevitable that we'll also stop things like death camps because we do in other instances, which probably means there's no risk that you get offense on this. Russia. Listen. They get to this with way too little time to win it. First, extend across our number 1 link it says Russia, plan agrees with ties with Russia. You can also couple it with Venezuela, sorry, I'm tired. You can also couple this argument with the number 4 solvency argument from advantage 2 that says that they actually increase, is advantage 2? Yeah, they actually increase U.S. and Venezuelan relations. That's a pretty good argument about how your plan definitely makes Russia freak out. You read it, how you help Venezuela and U.S. relations. On the line by the line. Their first argument is they're monopolizing now the status quo. They say the example of flying bombers over the Arctic. Already a couple of responses back to the first argument that that was previously the Exxon oil deal. Our argument right here is that actually after the Exxon oil deal, the U.S. and Russia did a joint sharing cooperation. That's the number 1 unique argument. You're not answering this question, which probably indicates a high likelihood they're actually cooperating on oil the status quo. The second argument is we have a pretty good argument about Russia. Russia and the United States are cooperating against Russia because if they can get oil from Venezuela, that's a bilateral trade argument. They seem to drop on your unique question, but you think it's a high likelihood that we're cooperating now on the status quo. Their next argument here that they also have the presence over Guam doesn't really respond back to the question we're asking you right now, we're answering right now, which is that Russia right now needs these oil reserves because the country, yes, has lots of oil, but the country only has lots of oil in the Arctic, which is part of the problem for them right now, which is that most of the Russian oil reserves come out of the Arctic and Siberia. The status quo, which are really hard to mine, really hard to get. The status quo, which is the reason why they're moving to Venezuela and Latin America in order to try to gain regional influence and stability for their oil contracts. Their next argument here, though, the oil contracts argument, I've already answered this argument. Their next argument is that we have embassies all over the world that are internal link arguments. One of the reasons why Russia views Venezuela so critical is because we don't have good elections now in the status quo, which is the reason why it's completely moving in this direction. Our argument is that yes, you are right. Relations are bad between the United States and Venezuela. Our argument on this is probably actually better than yours. That a world in which we have embassies all over the world means that Russia looks for the place that they can go where they can get oil safely, where we don't have embassies. Their next argument that reinstate ambassadors all the time. Our argument is that your advantage number 2 gives us a link analysis into about how you actually increase U.S.-Venezuela relations. That part of their impact story probably gets a highly good that your own solvency argument damns you on this piece of paper. You just can't kick out your own fucking solvency argument and claim that you increase relations and then say, no, we don't. Our argument that because you increase relations, that means that Russia has a perception of freak out. Probably a pretty high likelihood. Listen, there is not a shred of offense on this piece of paper. Not a one. A couple of things you need to extend. First, we say this leads to an immediate Russian backlash because they're afraid of loss of more unilateral trade in the United States and unilateral relations. That's your story. Additionally, We say it turns case because of multiple reasons that Matt can explain to you really well in his LOR and really persuasively. We also say leads to extinction, which is not a great warrant given, but it's still there. We say it causes accidental war between the two countries because of multiple miscalculations that can happen between them. This argument's pretty intuitive. Our argument is that a war which you have two powers fighting over, we are already there in the Arctic as well, so Russia would have to then remilitarize the Arctic and move into the Arctic. They pulled out all of the nuclear submarines. That's the internal link argument that we say that Russia has actually moved their nuclear submarines out of the Arctic and has on the border of the land they control. Probably a good reason why they could then remilitarize the Arctic. That's a pretty good reason why, nuclear icebreaker, sorry, a reason why that miscalculation should be inevitable because you have two great powers fighting in a close space, which is probably the most likely scenario for nuclear war and the only probable one that's left in the debate round because there's going to be none.
Are you going to answer their advantages turn case arguments on the advantage?
Yeah.
Okay, just making sure you're going to get them.
The advantages turn the dissent arguments will answer on the advantages. Solvency. Only argument I want is that plan pisses off, plan destroys, actually I want to hear these arguments. They're only arguments that these solvency arguments actually is the reason why specifically there would be a lead for disadvantage, but our argument that both advantage number one, advantage number two, predicate increase United States relations and it's a high, like that this doesn't happen. The second argument, you don't concede these arguments, Republicans, we will concede that we're going to see there's no risk to say yes because it's a race to reinstating elections. Additionally, guys, hey, shift from Chavez probably to high likelihood that you are behind this debate. You can stick off their first argument to answer all of these arguments about how the shift from Chavez into a new leader means there's actually a chance for them to say yes. The problem was hey, Chavez best leader, which means that they're always going to say yes, which means you have no risk of using these arguments to take our link. Using these arguments to take our link. Advantage two. Listen, all of their arguments are that this dude likes the United States, so he can't possibly be a dictator. What? We install dictators all the fucking time, guys. You're way behind this question. I won Matt's first term. Their argument is that he's always going to continue to support, that Caprice will always continue to support Cuba. No. We specifically said to cite you that Caprice actually wants to increase humanitarian aid to Caprice the status quo needs to high. Like, could this actually go down there? Argument that whatever. He might also say that's probably not true. We're going to speak against this about how he's been quoted as saying. Additionally, he's also said that Cuba's a problem for them because it's a problem for their national elections. That's one of the reasons why the United States likes them. Probably means it'll highlight the doctors will not become, which would be millions of deaths. That's a unique impact to the case. I can lose the disadvantage and win this argument. Additionally, I want Matt's number two argument probably just better. Their argument that Capri is better for the environment because because they both want because the other guy owns oil revenue. Probably doesn't respond back to like rear windows. Probably doesn't respond back to the fact that even with his mining, there's been increased regulations in the environment and Caprice is a very far like traditional economic liberal who doesn't want government restrictions on the economy. That's one of the reasons why the United States government fucking likes it because it helps our oil interests. It needs a high likelihood we're ahead on this question and a reason why a state run has a better chance acting for regulation because they are opening up the trade to willy fucking nilly to get to likelihood that we'll sweep the trade argument. We're still head on the question. The next argument, China's moving in, does respond by the fact that there is existing regulations that we want to support and Caprice saying he wants to decrease electric regulations. That's damning for you because we'll see Brazilians and Venezuela's the most important ecosystem in the world. We see it's one of the most diverse. It's high. Like you have another deciding against you. Next, human rights. Third term. They say Caprice wants human rights, that's why he wears like baseball shoes. That argument's a joke, and the other argument they have 22% homicide rate. Realize the fact that you have a homicide rate and have human rights. We have a horrible homicide rate in the United States for neutralization, yet we still support human rights. Couple of arguments. The first argument I say here is that Caprice when he was mayor of when his mayor of his province actually cut off water and electricity to poor suburbs that were actually trying to revolt against him. It's high, like he's actually worse for the second argument. He did a press conference actually this last 2 months. He actually said that he didn't support the international human rights movement. It's high, like that he's more of a liberalist on trade and doesn't give a shit if human rights board whereas the other where the candidate we describe actually specifically said that he's actually in favor of international human rights, and that's one of the things he criticized Chavez about. Last. We say that there's inflation in every fucking single country in Latin America, and there has never been a war on it. That argument goes dropped. They say the result with Venezuela. Matt's argument is there's ample inflation in every other country. That argument is pretty persuasive that there's zero risk for an impact. We're going to lay out why you don't get an offensive reason why there's a regional instability.
That's the oil shock collapse argument. Read arguments like Russian investment.
They read these oil shock collapse arguments to turn our diss out. The first argument response back to this oil shocks have happened over the last 10 years repeatedly and ever causes half problems. Oil shocks aren't controlling this precise example. When the U.S. economy was down, we actually saw rising gas prices. Well, the summer of 2007 actually had some of the worst oil shocks that didn't happen. The third argument is that we would isolate the example of Russian investment results back for oil shocks and Russian investment into Venezuela would actually allow for some continued stability because they're investing in things like critical oil infrastructure means that it is a result of the question for our direction. Advantage one is wrong. Easy, valid for William Jewell. Extend across Matt's subpoint C argument on other countries or on their presence. Matt's subpoint C argument, Brazil gave them uranium. That is a devastating argument. Fine, they didn't get basing rights, but your rating's a way bigger deal, guys. It's the reason why, even if you saw for Venezuela, Brazil can still come in and fill the void, which would be a reason why if Iran feels that they lose Venezuela, they'll still dispute to Brazil, and the status quo as triggered 100% of your impacts needs to be around. Additionally, I want max over the Israel strikes don't lead to, don't happen because Mossad report their arguments. They don't have their report. Mossad should report that they have no incentive to strike, because it's way too politically risky.
Okay. Float overview on top, advantage 1, this side, advantage 2. Anybody need that repeated? Yes. Okay. It'll be a float overview on top, followed by advantage 1, the dissad, and advantage 2. Okay. Is everyone ready?
Yeah.
Three really easy reasons why I'm voting for the opposition from William Jewell today. The first is that there is zero risk of the school not solving 100% of the affirmative. They conceded multiple arguments indicating that there is absolutely no risk of there being any U.S. or Israeli strike against Iran, but additionally that, there's absolutely no risk that there could be any collapse in Latin America that could possibly collapse the entirety of the economy. Indicates that there's only a risk of the exterior offense we read both on case and on the dis side. The second reason that we are winning is that we are well ahead on the Russian disadvantage. You do not put any offense there. Most of your linked defense is absolutely answered by the shell of the dissat. This is problematic for them because it not only accesses the independent impact of a nuclear extinction scenario between the US and Russia, but they've conceded that it turns their case, which means that they don't get any solvency for advantage 1, advantage 2. They will try to leverage both of them against the dissat and say the impacts are inevitable, but when you don't get solvency for those impacts, you will not be able to say that advantage 1 or advantage 2 will make the dissat inevitable. Third reason that we are winning is going to be that we are ahead on time frame. Your time frames to your advantages are absolutely terrible. First, your advantage 1 time frame is going to be a long way off because it will literally take Iran. Iran doesn't even have the bases there right now, so Iran will have to literally develop the bases, send all their troops over there. Then Israel will have to formulate a plan to strike. It will be a long time that will take. But the second argument is advantage 2 will take a very, very long time because it hasn't collapsed since 2007. No risk of it collapse now. You've not read immediacy arguments, whereas we read an argument in the LOC that the dissat impact happens instantaneously, which means that all the impacts become inevitable. You evaluate time frame first for a couple reasons. The ace of point is an impact that happens first, would shift the uniqueness to every other impact in the debate round. It's impossible to determine what would happen with Latin American economies in a world in which US and Russia are already going to war with each other. It means that you would have to make new uniqueness arguments for them. But the B point is your impacts are irrelevant if we were already dead from a nuclear holocaust caused by US-Russian war, which means you evaluate saving lives in the interim and voting on the dis side. Go to advantage 1. The Brazil argument is absolutely devastating. They will stand up and say that basing rights are all that matters, but that is not the internal link to their story. Their internal link is that the only reason why the U.S. would be concerned about Iran is because of their propensity to develop nuclear weapons, and that is absolutely impossible. That is absolutely inevitable in war. Brazil will still have uranium, which means that there is no reason why you would get solvency for this. Additionally, our argument is that even if they win all of these arguments, that basing rights are important and that Iran is going to have nuclear weapons, we are still winning the argument that Israel cannot strike their reactors. They have conceded the argument that the biggest source of Iranian enrichment is the Fordo reactor, which is in a mountain that no amount of Israeli TNWs can even break through. That is the warrant for why Mossad would never attack. You've conceded that argument. It means zero risk of advantage 1, but additionally, we absolutely turn it with the dissad, but we'll go there on the dissad. So let's go there now. They do not even kind of respond to this story. They will go for this argument that plan doesn't hurt because we have ambassadors in every other country. That is exactly our argument. That is why Russia thinks that Venezuela is key because they think that they can dominate oil there. That is a conceded LOC argument. Additionally, they will have to go for the argument that other reinstatements should have triggered, but they have conceded a couple things. The one is that the other reinstatements didn't lead to a long-term increase in relations, which is your solvency arguments. But the second argument is that they conceded that now is the key time because Russia is uniquely tenuous with Venezuela because of the elections, which means that all their empirically denied arguments are irrelevant because the uniqueness has shifted. Additionally, we will win the argument that this turns the entirety of the case. The ace of point is you have conceded that this will massively increase instability in Latin America and that it will increase Iranian proliferation. They will be far more incentivized to engage in more rapid proliferation and more rapidly expand into Latin America too because they think that we're attacking their ally Russia, which means that there's no risk of this. But the B point is they've conceded that not only would this make Russia more likely to give Iran nuclear technology to allow them to proliferate faster, but also that US and Russian instability would make it more likely that the Latin American economies would collapse because we're having to pull out of there. It means we are well ahead on turning the case. Advantage 2. Look, we are absolutely going to be winning these offensive turns. You have conceded the argument that because Priel says that aid to Cuba is a waste of time and that Maduro supports it. You just say that he likes Latin America. Argument is he likes the U.S. more. That's why we are backing him. Additionally, we will definitely win the argument that oil shocks have empirically not caused collapse. Should have happened in like 1977 and 2008. No risk of the advantages and the disside turns them anyway and with a faster time frame.
Alright, here's the order. Overview, solvency page, advantage 1, advantage 2, and
Sorry, overview solvency page and just say it again.
yeah, overview, solvency page, advantage 1, advantage 2, Russia. This wasn't the juice. Okay. Everybody ready?
Yep.
This debate could not be more simple. You can see that there are going to be bases in Venezuela that allow Iranian soldiers to be there. This is a problem because it trips the link to proxy wars. Even if you win the argument that they're not going to get fissile material, that does not matter because they will still be developing things like dual-use technology and still have hostile rivals in the area. That is most certainly enough to trip the break. You have not made a single compelling argument that proximity is the key internal link to these strikes. You conceded an argument about Cuba in the 1960s. It is game over for you. You are also losing on the Russia disadvantage. We have a couple Slayer arguments which you don't respond to. Go to the solvency page now. Only argument we need is that the reason why Larry Palmer was kicked out in the very first place is because he was seen as not being friendly to Venezuela. When we create a visa, when we reinstate an ambassador, that looks good because it looks like we are resetting relations. All of the bad relations happened under Chavez. We fix that. We move away from Bush era doctrine, means that the relations are reset. All of your arguments about kicking them out a bunch of times don't matter because look, a new leader is in power, which means that none of your no solvency arguments actually matter. Next will be on Iran. The first argument is that the only thing that matters here is that the Venezuela and Iran being buddy-buddy creates proxy wars in Brazil, which creates an independent impact, which you do nothing to resolve. This is okay. Turns it sad because it means that there would be instability in the region. Russia can't get any oil, makes them mad. Also, it's a lot faster time frame because at the point where they are building that they are about to build the base now, time frame is absolutely key. The second that base goes in is the second that the United States strikes because it is literally our enemy in our backyard. This also is bad for Russia because when you have Iranian soldiers there, it looks like Iran is going to get the oil contracts. That is our argument from the get-go, which would make them mad. Also outweighs the magnitude because it is literally a try-or-die scenario when there's an enemy in our backyard. We unload our arsenal. It only takes 8 nuclear weapons, and that would most certainly happen, especially in a world where they have smuggled in fissile materials before. The United States will not take any chances. Andy, do you need anything else?
Great.
Also conceded argument that Israel won't strike, so the fissile material is irrelevant. Okay, elections. All I want you to do is go down to uniqueness, second point, second argument. Russian analysis do not like Maduro because they see him as lacking charisma and credibility. I wonder how this interacts with your scenario. It means that we have to let Caprizi be put into office. A couple reasons. First is it doesn't matter even if you win. Your arguments about Maduro being good, Russia absolutely hates him. Turn to the dissent. The next argument is that Maduro...
Sorry, point of order. Yeah, that argument was nowhere in the MG. I get that it was in the PMC, but it's cross-application to that meaning that Russia would love the U.S. as
like a
absolutely
link turn that should definitely be in the MG.
I mean, you do not breathe a word on it. The entire
Neither do you, though. Reading a new turn in the PMR is not allowed.
On these Maduro good bad debates.
Yeah. Okay. Finish your sentence and then we're done.
Okay, sorry. On the Maduro good bad debates, I extend that Russian polls have Prius ahead and that they prefer him.
Okay. Thank you.
Except both his arguments and Russian polls put them ahead, and they prefer him, which means all of your arguments don't interact. You also can see the argument that Maduro would allow for the deregulation of the force, which would be problematic, because it means that other countries go in, such as China and Russia, and deforest the entire area, which is problematic, probably an independent impact. You also isolate the social services, which would be good. Look, under a world of Maduro, there are not social services because he does not believe in that type of policy. Caprizi does believe in that type of policy because he wants to align themselves with Brazil, which would allow for a growth that would be beneficial for everybody. The elections is really important. You miss the entirety of the internal link scenario, which would be that he would cause problems because he would allow for because the internal government would collapse. The reason why is because the inflation is so high. You make the argument that inflation is high everywhere. That is not the specificity of our argument. Our argument says it is high under him because people are unable to get the basic food necessities. That happened with the power shift, which indicates that he doesn't have control. Coupled with your other arguments that he would be bad for social services, it is game over for you. The only impact that we want here is oil shocks. You say that the oil market isn't that big. No. These are all new MOR arguments. Golden PMR responses. First, the United States relies on Venezuela for its 8th largest oil partner. They have conceded the argument that even small shocks like Libya caused oil prices to double. For example, the Venezuelan pipeline, when it was bombed by FARC, it increased prices 40 to 30 cents.
And this would turn the dissent because it means that Russian
oil
is not beneficial.
Yes, and turns the dissent why?
Because it means that Russian oil contracts don't earn
because it means that Russian oil contracts do not earn the money that they should. Also turns because it means that oil shocks cause a global collapse, which means that there isn't any oil because it becomes dry or diluted resources. That is our argument, and the magnitude is immediate, right? If we get the 8th largest oil shut-off, we go to war with Russia. Do you want to know why we do that? Because it looks like the only oil we have left is the Arctic. That is your scenario. The reason why this doesn't happen now is in a world where the election comes in our favor. It means that none of these problems happen because oil shocks don't happen. The magnitude of this is 100% because it causes extinction. The probability is also 100% because if the United States gets cut off, it is problematic. Go to Russia. We try to decide a couple ways. First is that they don't like Maduro, and the next argument is that they also would need a stable scenario to get oil. They're not going to have a stable scenario when they put in a base for Iran, which allows Iran to probably siphon off the contracts, but moreover, it allows them what? Also causes problems because they're the 8th largest supplier. Also, they have $1 billion or $1 million worth of contracts in the area, which means that these all go out the window. You have also conceded that the investors wouldn't like it because it looks like the basing rights are trying to take over the oil. These are all reasons why we would solve that. What do you want?
That's fine. Just extend the defense from the MG.
Okay, yeah. What do you want, Andy? Okay. What Russia really likes is having oil contracts. The way that this happens is if there's not instability in the region, the bases cause instability. We turn that. They have also conceded that the basing rights would be problematic for Russia.
Good night, guys.
Here we go.
Good night.